When a billionaire yanked the plug on a pioneering Chicago digital news site, putting him out of work, he went ahead and co-founded another digital news site.
The fundamental lesson was, how about instead of asking local businesses to support it with advertising dollars, why don't we just ask the readers directly to support it with subscription dollars or with donations?
Seamus Toomey had a long and distinguished career in traditional newspaper journalism, including close to a decade at the Sun-Times, where he supervised the team that won a 2011 Pulitzer, before embracing digital journalism, first at the late DNA Info Chicago, and now at Block Club Chicago, which he co-founded and serves as editor-in-chief. I'm Charlie Meyerson with Rivet 360 and ChicagoPublicSquare.com, and this is Chicago Media Talks, a show in which people in Chicago media talk about Chicago media. Now here's my co-host, my friend, and my Rivet 360 colleague, journalism strategist, Sheila Solomon.
Seamus, what made you become a journalist?
Boy, good question. Origin question. I became a journalist because I started in high school. A lot of, like other young journalists, I like to write. I got involved, actually started as a cartoonist in high school for the school paper, and watching the other journalists around me working on the school paper, the Evanstonian, Evanston Township High School. I found it fascinating. So when I was old enough to be a staff member, I applied and got a job, and it just started there. And my high school friends always say I'm the only one that actually followed through with the plans I said I was going to do, what I was going to become when I was in high school.
And eventually this propelled you to a role with the 2011 Pulitzer Prize. Tell us about that.
Well, that was a project we did at the Sun-Times, and I will be quick to always say that the real geniuses behind that project were the three reporters and photographer. That was Mark Conkle, Frank Main, and John Kim. They did a summer-long look and beyond about violence in Chicago. The gist of the story was why they won't stop shooting in Chicago. Which is a theme that just as relevant in 2021 as it was 10 years ago. But those three just put in incredible work on it, and they ended up winning the 2011 Pulitzer for local reporting, which the Sun-Times hadn't won a Pulitzer in a while, so it was a very big deal. And full credit goes to John Kim's incredible audio recordings and still photography work he did on it, and Mark Conkle and Frank Main's incredible reporting and writing.
So you're at the pinnacle of what many people would consider the pinnacle of a journalism career, and yet you left print journalism, you left the Sun-Times in 2013 for this new digital startup, DNA Info Chicago. What were you thinking? There's every once in a while you just figure it's time for a change. The Sun-Times, I'd been there almost 10 years. Sun-Times, anyone that's worked there or follows it is sort of in at least back then, was in a sort of constant state of turmoil. Concerns about it shutting down at any moment. In hindsight, looking back, it's a survivor. It keeps going forward, and it keeps finding new people that want to invest in it and keep it alive, and that's wonderful. 10 years ago, it was we were going through just a bunch of things. There was layoffs happening, and this new opportunity came along to do just digital. How about not doing not serving two masters, the print and the digital? What if we just did, it just goes up whenever it's ready to go up, and there's no print deadlines when you've got to, cut bait early. So it was intriguing. I was up for something new, and so I gave it a shot. What were some of the hardest challenges you faced making that transition from print journalism to, what was then still a relatively new concept, this, news on the web thing?
Yeah, I think it was a more, I wouldn't say it was necessarily a structural thing. It was more of getting people to read a brand new website. I wasn't going to an established entity. We, didn't exist. There had been talk about DNA Info starting up. And there'd been a long runway for which I was not there for. My Block Club colleague Jen Sabella was there. I think she was the second hire, and she did a lot of the hiring early on and built just an incredible crew there. But yeah, I think one of the biggest things was just getting people to come to us, to read us, to trust us, and all that with kind of a weird name. DNA Info, we had to repeat it a lot to people and tell them what it stood for and all that. So, just getting people to trust a brand new news entity was probably the hardest part.
Remind us what it did stand for.
I don't remember.
Digital news. I forget what the A was, wasn't it?
It's a funny story, at least to me. It was sort of a rolling meaning for what it meant. I was told it stood for Digital News and Information when I was hired. Later to find out it actually stood for Digital Network Associates, which is even worse. And somewhere along the way, I changed it sort of on the fly in the newsroom to the Digital Neighborhood Authority, which I thought sounded a little bit cooler. I mean, we did, we had to work within the four corners of the indictment, so to speak. But DNA Info. Block Club actually owns the DNA Info name, but we decided to leave it behind, and I can't say I'm sad about that.
Coming up, what emerged from the ashes of DNA Info Chicago?
Chicago Media Talks is sponsored by Sun Fun U Mediterranean Voyages. When you need a break from all the news and from the windy city itself, join Sun Fun U for a week yachting through the Mediterranean, learning history of the region and playing in the sea. To make trouble seem a world away, visit Sun Fun U and sign up for a voyage this summer.
WTTW News and Chicago Tonight are committed to providing trusted journalism, fact-based news, and authentic engagement that is reflective of the diverse voices of our region. By donating at WTTW.com/fundnews, you support in-depth coverage and analysis of Chicago news and public affairs across WTTW's television and digital platforms. Don't miss Chicago Tonight each weekday at 7 p.m. or streaming on WTTW.com wherever you are. Latino Voices on Saturdays at 6 p.m. and Black Voices on Sundays at 6 p.m.
So take us back to 2017 and the last days of DNA Info Chicago. What led to its demise?
Oh, boy. A handful of things. The first of which is a standard journalism, digital journalism, all journalism problem was that there was not enough money to fund it. It was free site. It relied on digital advertising, banner ads to be specific, and you really can't. It's really hard to make a living on banner ads. Those things are virtually worthless. You can sell millions of them and still hardly pay for a reporter. And we weren't bringing in enough revenue to support which was a very large newsroom at that point. I think when we closed, we were upwards of 25 actually journalists. We also had a sales staff. We had a big overhead, and there just wasn't enough advertising revenue coming in. The subplot was there was a sister newsroom in New York, DNA Info New York, and there was a push at that point for unionization, and I think that combined with sort of the losing revenue encouraged the owner just to pull the plug.
Which brings me to my next question. What was it like working for the founder of these publications, Joe Ricketts, the conservative patriarch of the family that had bought and still owns the Chicago Cubs?
Well, what I always say is choose to remember how much money he put into journalism in Chicago. He really sunk a lot of his own money into this idea that you could make a digital only, neighborhood focused news site. And he gave it a go, and he gave us a chance. He gave myself and Jen and all of our reporters. He hired a lot of people. We had a big staff, and we covered a lot of news. We broke a lot of stories. So for that, I'm grateful. Obviously, I wish we were I wish it didn't end the way it ended. But he did not, it wasn't sort of a, cover this, cover that. He wanted neighborhood news. He wanted, he wanted to keep it as local as possible. And, I appreciate the financial commitment he put into getting DNA Info off the ground and, keeping us afloat for 5 years.
So, Seamus, in your response, you seem to be talking about the potential and the experiences that you realized from being a part of DNA Info. What other lessons did you learn from DNA Info that propelled you into Block Club Chicago?
The biggest thing that we learned was there is a hungry appetite. There's a big audience for the sort of news that we were doing. It wasn't, DNA Info didn't close down for a lack of stories or readers or any of that. It was a funding problem. So we figured out if we could come back with essentially the same editorial model, covering neighborhoods by geography, digging down very deep, doing some stories that, most publications may not do because they're so small. But there could be extremely interesting to a small group of folks, let's say, just one neighborhood, only one neighborhood might be interested. We don't worry about how this is going to play on the other side of town because we'll have a reporter there doing the small story there. So we knew that could work in terms of bringing people in. The question was, okay, how do we then pay for these reporters and these editors? So that was sort of the fundamental lesson was, don't give up on the editorial side or this vision that people will come and read your news and find it valuable. But how about instead of asking local businesses to support it with advertising dollars, why don't we just ask the readers directly to support it with subscription dollars or with donations?
After DNA Info folded or was folded, did you consider returning to print journalism?
Not really. I mean, of course, we closed on a Thursday night. I need to keep working. So, sort of everything was on the table, but, we were very sad. It was a bummer. We all went out and had a few cocktails. Funny, cool story. When word got around, we were, pretty popular site. We had 110 million page views in our final year. When we closed down, word went around on Twitter, and there started an online. I forget if it was GoFundMe or something. I don't think it was that formal, but they started just raising money to buy a cocktail for the DNA Info folks as a thank you, and they raised like a couple $1,000 for the crew went out, and of course we burned through it in a night. I think that was one bar tab. But after a couple days of that, licking our wounds, we, a couple of us got together and said, okay, listen, we got to keep this going somehow. We've got this big audience. We've got people out there that all of a sudden we just pulled the chair out from underneath them in terms of providing and getting their news. What if we came back pretty quickly? Let's not wait a year. Let's do it quickly so people will make the connection that the folks that used to bring you DNA Info are now this new entity, that we could still grab those people. So that was how quickly it happened. So didn't have a lot of time to start thinking about going back to print. We really wanted to keep pushing forward and doing digital. I've been in the news industry long enough to know that there's still value in print journalism. I mean, there's advertisers still like display ads. They can be a very compelling way to reach people. And it's also, print is still a way that a big segment of the city and the world gets their news, especially, the older segment. So I get that there's tons of value in putting out a print publication that people can hold. But in the long run, I think everyone realizes that it is fading. It fades a little bit more every year, and eventually, if you want to be on the forefront of it, you're better off without certainly not a daily publication.
So walk us through what happened between November 2017, when DNA Info shut down, and February 2018, when Block Club Chicago launched.
It was Stephanie Lulay, Jen Sabella, and myself. We did a lot of Googling of things, how to make this work. I mean, we basically started our own nonprofit, and I can't say any of the three of us had any idea what it was involved with that. It's not terribly difficult for some of the mundane things. You got to walk into the Secretary of State's office in the Thompson Center and put in some handwritten paperwork establishing your articles of incorporation. You need to pick a board of organize a board of directors, things like that. Open a bank account. Consider, do you need an accountant? Get a QuickBooks subscription, like boring stuff like that, but stuff that you really need to do. So, but all the while we're thinking about, okay, which of our laid off reporters can we get back? They all started, finding new jobs, hopefully, as quickly as they could. They didn't want to be out of work for too long. Everyone got something like 3 months severance, so people had a little bit of a runway, but we needed to keep moving and do it fast, and we wanted to get back and not lose this readership as well. So a lot of that time spent was talking to potential funders. Making decisions about, are we going to be a for-profit? Are we going to be a nonprofit? If we're a for-profit, where's the first round of funding come from? Do we go to venture capitalists to raise money? Do we go to philanthropic groups to raise money as a nonprofit? So all that stuff. It was a fascinating time. Jen, Stephanie, and I made a point to try to work in a different coffee shop every day and all around the city. We really wanted to get out there and see the city and work somewhere with free Wi-Fi.
So where'd the name come from?
I think the origin on that is, I think Jen was the winner of that one. I just came across a spreadsheet. It was just titled The Name in my Google Drive. And I'm afraid to look at it because this was an arduous process. We had dozens of, hundreds of potential names. And, you can come up with a great one, but if you've got no hope of us getting the domain name or anything close to it, you sort of want to move on. You didn't want to have some domain that was just too hard. So Block Club was actually it was what we called the lighthearted blog section of DNA Info. Like whenever we had a story that we thought was a little maybe too goofy for straight news, we would make it a Block Club, and the idea was for us for Block Club Chicago was. Block clubs are sort of to me, like the sort of the most down-to-earth form of government in Chicago. They're literally one block, semi-democratic. You've got a block club president who tries to keep things in line, does the organizing, if they're going to put up signs, if they're going to make up rules, if they're going to keep people in touch. So for us, it was very representative of what we do. We're on the ground. We like to do things, from the ground up, small, medium, large stories. And a block club was sort of the very basic building block of organizing in Chicago. So we thought it had a nice ring to it.
So subscriptions are keeping you afloat, or is it a combination of subscriptions and other things?
The theory all along was if this is going to work, this is going to have to be the readers who are supporting us. If they find it valuable and enough of them come and they pay $59 a year, $6 a month, that we could make this sustainable. So at this point, we are 70% reader funded. That's from our almost 17,000 paid subscribers who also, bless their hearts, they many of them turn around and give donations throughout the year as well. I think $59 a year is a pretty good deal. I think some of them do as well, and some of them choose to pay $100 a year, or some pay $250 a year, just as a sort of a measure of goodwill. Like, we like what you guys are doing. We want to keep you alive. We will, we'll give you a little bit more. We'll buy a T-shirt. We'll buy a tote bag. We'll make a donation during a fundraising drive. So between those donations and those subscriptions, it's about 70% of our annual budget. And then the rest is it's a combination of we sell some merchandise that's been pretty popular, and we've got some support from family foundations and philanthropic groups as well, like the Joyce Foundation and the MacArthur Foundation and the McCormick Foundation. And I shouldn't start naming them all because I'll leave them out. But Report for America, we're teamed up with them. We've got a couple of reporters for the Report for America program, and that pays for some of the salaries of those folks. So so that other 30% is I would say sort of a patchwork mosaic of other funding that's where we try to get creative on that one, I would say.
So Seamus, is that model, do you think, replicable for other news organizations, old and new?
Yes, I think it is. Now, I mean, there's a big caveat that, Chicago is a very large city. So we've got, we're swimming in a much bigger pond to try to find subscribers. If you were to start this in a city of 100,000, you could do it. Whether you could get 17,000, 20,000 subscribers, I think that would be a stretch. So I think it scales down a little bit of how many reporters you could have. But I definitely think it's doable, and it is being done. There are similar newsrooms around the country, and new ones pop up all the time. And it's really just it's a simple equation of saying, is the local news valuable to you? Because if there's nowhere else to get it, and a group wants to start up and say, we're going to send someone to your village board meeting, we're going to send someone to local businesses to write about them, or to find out what the sirens were last night. If that's valuable enough to pay a little bit a month, then we can keep this going. And I think in the last 5-10 years, as we all acquire more monthly subscriptions to things, we start to pick and choose, like, what can we afford that's valuable to our lives? Is it your Netflix? Is it your Hulu? Is it any of your these streaming services that pop up? You kind of pick and choose what can I afford that I'm going to use, and we hope to slide in there of something valuable to people that they may or may not be able to get elsewhere. So around the country, I think that's definitely doable. You gotta find the right price point that people can afford, and you just gotta be careful. You can't go overboard and hire 40 people right away and expect to make all that back. You gotta grow, and you gotta grow sustainably.
Tell us about Block Club's implementation of a paywall to keep people from reading some content until they've put some money on the table. How is that working? How has your strategy evolved since launch?
We said from the beginning we weren't going to put any breaking, like, crime or emergency news, public safety news behind the paywall. So I would always say, like, if I don't want you to have to, click, put in a credit card to find out what's burning in your neighborhood or something like that. But it's really evolved to include
we don't put anything COVID related behind the paywall. Again, that's seems pretty obvious, but we were one of the first news organizations to do that. A lot of others. I think most others now do the same. Just didn't make sense. If you're trying to get out this emergency information to readers, you want to get it as easily as possible to them. We've also, we don't put stories generally in neighborhoods that have tend to historically been underserved by the media, like the West Side, big chunks of the South Side. We want that stuff to be as accessible to the readers down there as possible. So it's we've started to call it like a freemium model. There's a lot of it is available to everyone, and then there's some stories. It's a lot of we cover a lot of neighborhood developments, new businesses. So some of that stuff is the stuff that's subscription only, as well as the neighborhood newsletters. That's the premium content that if you subscribe, you get access to all of that.
So Seamus, can you tell us what else you're doing on your site?
One of the things that we are doing is we began a COVID hotline, which is a free bilingual hotline that was available to anyone in Chicago can call in, they could text in, they could email in, and just with any questions they had about coronavirus, about the city's restrictions, about it's much more about vaccinations now, but back early on last year it was testing sites, where could you go to get free tests, which had the shorter lines, where what was the closest place to you, how long should I quarantine when I'm out of town, that sort of thing. We discovered early on, not surprisingly, when COVID hit, there was just a lot of questions out there. There was just so much confusion, and the news was different every day. The city was trying their best to stay on top of it, but it was a moving target. There was a lot going on. Rules were changing on a daily basis. The science guidance was changing on a daily basis. No one knew. This was brand new to everyone. So we were answering a lot of those questions. We were doing a lot of explainer stories. Our coronavirus main reporter, Kelly Bauer, is just an amazing mind. She was able to track all this stuff and know what were the latest rules and guidance. And so she was doing a lot of these stories. And Stephanie Lulay had come up with the idea of, well, what if we just did a free hotline that anyone could call in? Because maybe we're not answering every question with our stories. What if there's a specific one? So we went out and we got some funding for that one. We hired some bilingual journalists to staff it as well. And, we've taken, I think, almost 1,000 individual calls, which is one-on-one help. Someone calls in with a question. What about this? We get them either point them to the right. We either get them the answer or we point them to the right folks. We're very careful. If people come in and call in with symptoms, what do I do with this one? We always encourage them to call a doctor. We're not staffed by physicians. We're journalists pointing people to the information that's available because we've been collecting it already. So it's we're very proud of it just because it's. It wasn't meant to, help Block Club. It was trying to get all this information out a different way than we're used to doing with newsletters, with social media posts, with that. This was direct one-on-one help for people in the community in Spanish and in English.
And how's it making a difference that you also have photos of each of the reporters with their stories, as well as these headings like original reporting and on the ground and sources cited?
That was an innovation that was from the early days, from our first day at Block Club. It was they're called the credibility indicators, and they're at the top of every story. Let's see, we've moved around a little bit. They used to be on the side. Now they're right before the text of the story. And what they do is we've got 4 different ones. There's one for original reporting. There's one for on the ground, and there's one for sources cited, and then there's one for subject specialist. And but pretty straightforward original reporting. We're just telling our readers that this is not aggregated copy. This is something that the reporter herself reported out and vetted. On the ground is more specific. That means the reporter actually went out on the story. Was knocking on doors, or was at the scene of the crime, or was just out at the meeting, just to let people know that we're out there doing the work. Sources cited is one of the more general ones. Most stories have some sources cited. Whether it's experts or community leaders or people, witnesses, and the subject specialist. We reserve that one for. The reporters tend to become experts on a handful of topics in their neighborhoods. Mauricio Pena, who covers Pilsen, has really done a lot about environmental reporting, industrial pollution. He was the one covering the Hilco smokestack disaster that covered Little Village in dust cloud right at the start of the pandemic. So when Mo Pena writes a story about that, I usually click the subject specialist box because he's earned his stripes on that one. So we get a lot of good feedback on it. It was a credit goes to Civil. Civil came up with that one, and I believe some of the other similar sites to ours, our friends around the country, a couple of them use it as well. But it's funny. We thought it was cool when it started. We had no idea that how well received it was going to be by our readers. We get so many positive comments on it. So I always make sure I tell the people that came up with it, Julia Himmel. Julia, people still love it. So nice work.
This producer Jesse, I was just wondering if you could quickly recap for us the legend of Chance the Snapper.
Oh, I would love to. One of my favorite Block Club stories. It was a couple summers ago. We get an email that says, "Hey, I'm a subscriber. I was going for my morning walk through Humboldt Park, and I swear there is a crocodile or an alligator in the lagoon." That's the email. This is, kind of a dream come true for a newsman. So I write the guy back and say, can you call us immediately? So he calls because I want to sort of vet him, to make sure that it's not, a crank. He tipped me off that he's a subscriber, which means, he's, good people. So I talked to him and he said, yeah, it's not a log. Someone else pointed it out to me. We could see it. It's an alligator. So we called Mina Bloom, our Humboldt Park reporter. Mina, get out there, check it out, see if this is real. She hustles out there and she's on the hunt for not only seeing it, but finding someone who has a photo, because there's a rumor that a Park District person had gotten a photo. She does a little bit of work. She finds out, yes, multiple people had reported this sighting to the Park District. She gets a hold of the photo. This is all in the course of about an hour or two. We get a story up. Is there an alligator in Humboldt Park Lagoon? By the end of the day, when we got a much better photo, it was much stronger. Yes, there's an alligator in the Humboldt Park Lagoon. And it really just set off sort of a news frenzy, because there are no alligators or crocodiles this far north, certainly not in the Humboldt Park Lagoon, which is an inland lagoon. Someone obviously put it in there, but captured the fancy of the city, the imagination, and it took them a week to catch it. So we had a week of this frenzy of people showing up. There were like mariachi bands there. There were vendors. They were selling food. We've since found out that's probably what freaked the alligator out and kept him hiding in the weeds and avoiding being caught. But we ran a Twitter poll, a contest, name the alligator, and the winning vote by far was Chance the Snapper. I forget the actual person. We had a couple people did that, so we sent out free swag to them. And then we made T-shirts that were very popular. And happy to say Chance the Snapper is alive and well. He's at the St. Augustine Crocodile Farm. He gets regularly visited by alligator Frank Robb, who caught him. They're close friends, and he's growing by leaps and bounds. He's still adorable. I still think he looks like he's smiling whenever he takes a picture. So we love Chance the Snapper. He's sort of our unofficial mascot, and we hope he continues to grow right along with Block Club.
You've launched a podcast series with your old DNA Info collaborator and my friend, John Hanson. How's that going?
It's going fantastic. John Hanson is wonderful. He launched this. I think we're at about our 10th episode. So just about 10 weeks ago. It comes out every Thursday. It's called "It's All Good," and it's it's literally all good news. We do a lot of positive stories on Block Club. We do a little bit of everything, but one of the things that we really try to look for is people doing good things to make Chicago better. Interesting people around Chicago, neighbors helping neighbors. Stories that are inspirational, and the ones that you want to tell your significant other about, your friends about. Hey, did you hear about this? There's so much of that going on in Chicago, and sometimes it gets lost in the daily news where maybe it's about politics or it's about crime all the time. And it's one of the mantras at Block Club is that let's make sure we don't lose these human stories, these positive stories that really show what Chicago is all about. We all know Chicago isn't just crime and politics. There's so many great things happening. So we definitely make a point of highlighting those. And then John Hanson, he'll expand on them. He'll talk to the reporter who wrote it. He'll get the person doing the good deed on the on the podcast as well, and just go deeper into it and talk about it. And John's such an engaging journalist, personality, friendly guy. He worked with us at DNA Info. He was our broadcast editor. He went on to the Jam at WCIU, where he gained a lot of new fans around the city on TV, and now he's back with us, and we're really proud of the It's All Good podcast.
Why doesn't Block Club have columnists?
A decision early on. We wanted to go straight news. We didn't want to do opinion. At least for the foreseeable future. There's so much news to cover in Chicago. There's so many areas we still have left to cover. Opinion columns drive a lot of web traffic. They sell a lot of newspapers. They do a lot of things, and I've got I've got some favorites that I love to read. We wanted to keep it straight, and try to win over people all over the city just by telling them what's happening in their neighborhoods.
It's that time. Closing thoughts, Sheila?
Well, I think Block Club's value is its hyperlocal coverage, which keeps us much better informed about the people and places in our own backyards. Closing thoughts from you, Charlie.
With the exodus of columnists from our alma mater, the Chicago Tribune, Sheila, I'm hoping more of them find new homes with other organizations, or, like Seamus, team up to launch their own. Closing thoughts from you, Seamus.
A message to the folks that read us, that listen to our podcast, is that we do want to get bigger. We do want to reach your neighborhood. If we're not there yet, we're coming. We want to get someone covering every single neighborhood in Chicago. So we've got some spots to fill. And we hope to do this sustainably. We don't want to be the group that goes away in the middle of the night again. We want to be here for a good long time, because there's so many stories to tell in Chicago. There can never be enough journalists out there to do it. And we just want to put more of them out in the streets, out in the neighborhood, telling stories, good, bad, and funny about Chicago, because it's a great town and it deserves to have great news coverage. So we're doing our best, one reporter at a time, and we thank everyone that's
that's donated to us, that's bought a shirt, an alligator watch shirt, or a piping plover shirt, or a block club shirt, or a hat, bought a subscription, made a donation, any of that, or just told a friend about us, or forwarded a story to someone. That's how we're going to grow. We're going to win over one reader at a time, and hopefully we'll be talking about us in future podcasts.
Amen. Sounds like a winning strategy to me. Our guest on this edition of Chicago Media Talks, recorded live on Clubhouse, July 26th, 2021, has been Block Club Chicago editor-in-chief and co-founder, Seamus Toomey. You can reach Seamus via email at seamus@blockclubshy.org. That's SHAMUS. You can find Sheila Solomon at sheila@rivet360.com. And I'm Charlie Meyerson. Join me for a roundup of the news 10 weekday mornings at chicagopublicsquare.com. For Sheila Solomon, producers Bob Kessler and Mike Hoffman, and everyone at Rivet 360, thanks for listening to Chicago Media Talks.
Chicago Media Talks is sponsored by Sun Fun U Mediterranean Voyages. When you need a break from all the news and from the windy city itself, join Sun Fun U for a week yachting through the Mediterranean, learning history of the region, and playing in the sea. To make trouble seem a world away, visit Sun Fun U and sign up for a voyage this summer.
WTTW News and Chicago Tonight are committed to providing trusted journalism, fact-based news, and authentic engagement that is reflective of the diverse voices of our region. By donating at WTTW.com/fundnews, you support in-depth coverage and analysis of Chicago news and public affairs across WTTW's television and digital platforms. Don't miss Chicago Tonight each weekday at 7 p.m. or streaming on WTTW.com wherever you are. Latino Voices on Saturdays at 6 p.m. and Black Voices on Sundays at 6 p.m.
Rivet 360 makes podcasting easy. Want help with your podcast? Visit rivet360.com.